Hi everyone, Sweet Thinny Face Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of this new Zola Jesus album, Archon. Zola Jesus, aka Nika Rosa Danilova, she is back with her 6th full-length LP, which really builds on the instrumental ambitions of her last album, now bringing producer Randall Dunn into the mix, along with a lot of live drumming from Matt Chamberlain, which really enhances the percussive side of the record. Being an artist who has inhabited dark wave and art pop spaces for about a decade now, sound had become pretty enveloping on 2017's Okovi. Ritualistic, mesmerizing drums, cycling chants calling away in the background, frigid sheets of reverb caked all over Zola's lead vocals. The whole thing sounds like slowly making your way down into the cavernous structures that are pictured on the album cover here. Now, there are some points where the size of these songs and the effects laid into them almost get in the way of their enjoyability, like with all of the buzzing and distorted vocal effects on The Fall, for example, which I think are kind of a disservice to Nika's voice. I much prefer hearing it in the raw on the track Desire later on the record, which is one of the most stunning moments on the LP for its simplicity. Not that there aren't highlights on this thing that are on the dense side, there are. Sewn is definitely one. It's a rager, in fact, with driving drums and bass topped by Zola's vocals that are calling out into an endless abyss. The whole track undergoes this intense linear build and progression, layering up with more bass, percussion, and noise until the whole track essentially turns into a frightening drone, mystifying like on the track Into the Wild, which has some of the most powerful transition points of any track here, with these rapid synth arpeggios layering over each other, glossy patches, some elastic bass tones that kind of stretch from one part of the song to another. It's pure ecstasy. The song Undertow, for example, with its heavy drumming and droning synths, which do match perfectly with the imagery of diving into a deep, dark body of water depicted in the lyrics. But I think the last third of the song really fails to bring the track to a memorable finale. Vibrations left droning in the track's final moments, though I suppose the track does effectively create a lull before the very thunderous Sewn. And I do also like how this track muses about love, memories, some kind of connection, and whether or not it will outlast, like the death and demise of everything. Kind of a powerful sentiment in our current times where everything seems so finite. The final leg of this LP has some decent highlights too. There is Fault, which lyrically is a pretty simple moment on the album, all about choosing solitude and loneliness, and how Zola's choice in that is not your fault, the person who she's directing this message to. And that sentiment is driven in with a lot of repetition and this really immense build that moves in a couple of waves in the second half. There's also Ephemera, which I think is kind of a moment of fun, if you could call it that. Sure, it's dark and spacious like nearly every other track on this record, but simultaneously it feels kind of like a cathartic jam too, with all its howling chants, hand drums, and what sounds like maybe even a creaky cello screaming for dear life. Either way, it's entrancing and one of the most visceral moments on the record. But then there's the closer, which I have my reservations with. It is warm, harmonically and sonically much warmer than nearly every other track here, and that does kind of give us a positive note to leave on, but by that same token, the vocals are more buried here than they are anywhere else on the record. They seem almost like disconnected from the progression of the instrumental in some ways. There's just something about the instrumental and the vocals that doesn't feel like it's quite connecting. So yeah, I'm not entirely crazy about the finisher, but I still found this record to be pretty solid overall. Handily Zola Jesus' biggest album to date, but it's also a little maybe too big sometimes. So big that the sounds of these songs sound bigger than the songs themselves or the vocals, which I think could have used a bit more focus on the record. Could have gotten louder placement, more presence. Still, the vast majority of the time, the melodies and ideas and lyrics presented on these tracks are big enough to, contend with the size of these songs sonically. They do work hand in hand with the boundless atmospheres that these tracks play with. And for the most part, we get a like, please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head, it's another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Zola Jesus, forever.